All right, with me today is Cameron Barron. So he is a fitness coach, lifestyle coach, and owner and operator of Iron Forge Strength and Conditioning. Cameron, thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm, as we were talking offline, interested in digging into this. We're going to focus on nutrition and macros. And, I keep seeing the term macros and what that means and how am I supposed to apply it to my life, whether I'm, working out or not. But, maybe before we dig into the meat of the conversation, a little background on you and your fitness journey and where you are.
Right. So, grew up major athlete, four-sport athlete, all through from sixth grade on, never had a season off. I missed family gatherings because of football and all that other stuff. So then I graduated and then realized I want, in the real world, once you finish high school sports, if you keep acting and eating like you do when you're in season and practicing 3 hours a day, it doesn't work out real well. So I blew up. I finished my senior year. I just played football, had a major back injury. So I didn't get to play the rest of the sports I usually played, but I kept eating like I did. And so from the time I finished playing in December to graduation, I put on about 30 pounds of just absolute fat.
Wow.
So I went from 185 to about 215, and then just kind of kept sort of consistent there for a while. Got married, kids came along, gained some sympathy weight with the wife.
Yeah.
Our first with my son, all she craved was Little Caesars pizza and Chipotle. And if you eat those, we were going through like 4 large pizzas a week.
Listen, hey, I can
totally
relate. We were just having this conversation about our first, who's now 14, but I definitely did some sympathy weight. She was craving cheeseburgers.
Mm-hmm.
And so multiple times a week, she would want a cheeseburger from McDonald's. And, I couldn't let her eat alone. But I couldn't just get a cheeseburger. I had to get like a quarter pounder. It's like, come on, man.
Right. You get the fries, you get the drink, and
and it's at 9:30 at night. Meanwhile,
right. Shoot, if not later.
Yeah.
So April 24th, 2016, was at my church. My church, we do. They ask people to do a baptism video. So to kind of tell you a little bit of your story. So I'm sitting up there watching my video being played, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking, who is that on screen? That can't be me. Like, I look at myself every day in the mirror. That does not look like me. And I was just disgusted with what I saw. So I spent a week. I gave myself a week from April 24th to May 1st of 2016. I'm going to do all the research I can. I'm going to figure out a sustainable diet because I had yo-yoed back and forth. I'd tried keto. I'd tried South Beach. I'd tried Atkins. I'd tried all these different things. Never worked because they weren't sustainable for me. And I researched training programs and protocols. And so May 1st, I set out with a plan and just put my head down and went to work. At that point, I was 265 and I'm 5'10". So I'm not a tall guy to be 265. I looked pregnant with twins. I showed my before pictures to my kids the other day for the first time because they made a comment about someone on TV being fat, and I was like, well, guys, little education moment here.
Yeah.
So I showed them my picture, and my daughter goes, "Daddy, did you have a baby in your tummy?" I was like, "No, just looked like it." So that was where the passion for fitness got ignited, and then my goal was to be down 70 pounds before New Year's. So I gave myself essentially 7 months. And I beat that by 2 weeks. So, I think it was right around 12, 14, 16. I hit that, 193 goal. And learned a lot in the process, learned a lot about myself in the process. And so that, I've obviously kept it off and done some bulking and cutting cycles as I've manipulated macros and things like that over the subsequent years. But it's really driven me to the point where I want to help people do the same thing.
Right.
Because it's very intimidating. I mean, I at least had a very athletic background and knew some people that I could call on and say, hey, help me understand these terms. I don't really understand all these terms. There was a lot of late night Googling sessions
where
I was writing notes and like, all right, well, what's a macro? And then So how do calories factor into macros and all these different things? And there's 1,000 different calculators out there online, and half of them are absolute garbage. Some of them are pretty close, and others of them are just so.
Right.
And so,
and I think that's a key
you know,
point is, you know, the amount of information out there, finding trusted sources. And that first
that's the hard part.
you know, that first step too is you can, and for me, you know, everyone learns differently too, as much as we're talking about, you know, in other conversations, as you mentioned, the diet differences and what worked well for you doesn't necessarily work well for me. Not that the diets are invalid, but
Right.
also your objective. But anyhow, you know, just getting to the point of, you know, understanding yourself and personalized approach.
Right. And that's where, like, yes, there are some diets that are bad diets, right? Like they're not put together very well,
Right.
but they're usually not ones that mainstream people are kind of looking at. It's kind of fringy. But then, you know, keto isn't necessarily a bad diet. It is for some people, but it
Right.
also works for other people.
Yeah.
Just like macros may not be the way to go for everybody, right? If you're not prepared to spend a good bit of time in your meal prep and in your tracking, then maybe you're better off starting with calories and focusing on a single macro. That way you can kind of ease into it. That's what I do with a lot of my clients. I mean, I wrote a prescription up for a lady yesterday. Now I was like, hey, we're going to reverse diet you out. You've been, you know, metabolically adapted, under eating for so long. So here's your calorie count, your daily, here's your weekly calorie count. And then I need you to hit protein. That's all we're focused on right now. The rest of the calories will fall in where they may, and that's fine. I need you to hit that number.
Right.
Because ultimately it's very individualistic. And that's where having a coach who can help you understand how your body's responding, you know, what you feel better doing. It's like some people feel better on high carbs, some people feel better on lower carbs, you know, higher proteins and fats.
Right.
It just depends kind of, and there's a lot of trial and error there, and a lot of having to make sure that you've got a trusted source who can help guide you through that.
So to the point of your earlier comment on, you know, understanding all the things out there, take it to a 101 level on defining, you know, macros, so people can kind of get started and just
Right.
put it down.
So the theory behind macros is that it's very much, it falls in the category of calories in, calories out, right? If your maintenance is, I'm using just easy round numbers, but like if you're burning, or if your BMR, basal metabolic rate, is 2,000 calories. So if you laid in bed all day long just to breathe and stay alive, you burn 2,000 calories. And then, you know, you've got your desk job, and you've got, you know, you pick your kids up from school, things like that. So you got to figure out what's your total daily energy expenditure is, your TDEE. That's how then you can define your macros from there. There's a couple different ways you can do that, because you got to worry about your BMR, which is the basal metabolic rate, what you burn just being alive every day. Not day-to-day life. That's just you waking up and your bodily functions working.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then you've got your NEAT, which is non-exercise activity. So that's playing with your kids, that's your job, that's going to the grocery store, things like that. Then you've got your EAT, which is your exercise activity. And then the last piece is the thermic effect of food. And the thermic effect of food, you have no control over. Basically, the principle there is that certain types of foods and certain makeup of food, your body burns calories processing those foods. So like protein, even though, you know, a gram of protein is 4 calories, but your body ends up burning like 30% of that just to process it. So if you eat a higher protein diet, that's why most people who are trying to burn fat are going to have a higher protein diet, because they will burn more calories through the thermic effect of food. But there's also there's not a lot of science and empirical studies that have shown how to dial that in really well. So that one's kind of a wild card.
Yeah.
That and your NEAT are kind of wild cards.
Is that because there's so many variables and it's just kind
right. And because it is so individualistic that you could have, you know, unless you're going to do a huge population study, it's going to be really hard to quantify it.
But even then, like, it's good to have that macro data, macro on the macros,
right.
but give you that, again, that directionally correct to get an understanding of maybe how to affect a broader general population. But at the same
Right.
time, at the end of the day, you still have to kind of zoom it down to, I think Gary Vaynerchuk calls it clouds and dirt, right? You got
Right.
the clouds piece of all this, but then at the end of the day, you got to get it to the ground level of where
You'll be
you
able to plan it and do something with it.
right.
So basically, once you figure out kind of what you're burning, and there's a couple different ways you can do that. I mean, there's a calculation called the Harris-Benedict equation. That's pretty simple. All you need is age, height, weight. You get you your BMR, and then you just use an intensity factor. Like if you work out twice a day or every day for 7 days a week, you multiply that, whatever your number is, by 1.9. If you sit in a desk job and do nothing else, you don't even go for a walk every day, 1.2. And that gives you about where you're at. From there, we can kind of tweak.
Got it.
So, having that, once you have that number, then you can kind of figure out, all right, well, I'm going to calculate my macro breakdowns. Typically, what you'll see, assuming you're not trying to do a classic keto diet, because that is definitely one of the outlier diets, is you'll have a certain number of fats, proteins, and carbs. Typically, if you're trying to burn fat, most people I talk to are not trying to gain weight. They're trying to either recomp or lose some fat or get in better shape, however they phrase it.
Yeah, I was curious about that. If there's like different based on your objective, if it's like if you're burning fat versus like building muscle.
Right, and there is your macro ratios and how you'll break down your calories into your macros will differ. Because if you're trying to bulk, you actually typically are on that more like a 0.7 to 0.9 grams of protein per pound, versus if you're trying to lose fat, you're more in that 1 or 0.7 to 1.2 grams, depending on the person and kind of how hard they're training, where they're currently at, training age, all that factors into that decision.
Okay. So bottoms up to get to that number, like the food categories, I'll say.
So say it one more time.
Like the food categories, what's kind of like that? What does the meal plate look like? You know what I mean?
I mean, then that really depends on the person, right? I mean, so I'm gonna break down some just round numbers for us.
Okay.
So like if your total daily energy expenditure is 2,800 calories, so you factored in your BMR, your training, your non-exercise, all of that's factored in, and you're burning about 2,800 calories a day, and you're we'll say 185 pounds. You're going to want minimum of about 185 grams of protein. A gram per pound is a pretty safe place to start, unless you know that you're more on the muscular side, or that there's some other factors. You can kind of push that to 1.2. You typically the typical gold standard is a gram per pound.
Okay.
So you figure out your protein first, and then you figure out the fat. So on the fats, the way that breaks down is it's 20 to usually 50%, depending on the person. Usually the numbers I'm using when I'm coaching clients and preparing macro prescriptions is that 20 to 40% mark. So you figure out the fat number next. So if somebody responds really well to fat more than a higher carb diet, then you go more to that 40-45% of that total calories. So we'll do the math. That's 2,800. We said 185 protein, 740 calories. Come on. So you've got 2,060 left. So if we do 40%, that's 1,120 calories.
Okay.
So the 1,120. Come on. Gives you 940 calories left. So a gram of carbs is the last thing to figure out for your macros, because you've already got your proteins, you've already got your fats. So that 940 gives you 235 grams of carbs left. So for that person, that would be kind of their start point.
Their breakout. Yeah.
And your start point isn't always going to be where you stay. So like your start point, I tell clients, hey, we're going to run with this for 2 weeks. We'll see how you feel. If your biofeedback, if your sleep patterns, if your mood, if your sex drive, if your hunger levels, if any of that, your training energy, if any of that starts to dip or spike or anything like that, then we'll adjust as we need to dial that in further.
So how do you,
all we can really do is make our best educated guess on an initial prescription.
right. And so some key points that I'm thinking about is you got to give it time,
Right.
to kind of run its course. One thing I thought about though is like if you do any kind of adjustment on what your body's used to,
Right.
feel something that doesn't feel quote unquote right. So how do you
Right.
account for that in the feeling as an indicator element?
So when I'm doing like an initial prescription, I always ask people before I write it. Like I have a lot of times where I'll talk to somebody and be like, all right, let's reconnect in 7 days. Because if they haven't tracked any food at all, like they can't show me a food log in MyFitnessPal or Lose It or Argus or First Forms app or whatever these different apps are, if you can't show me a food recall, then it's really hard for me. I really can't do you justice on
Right.
your initial prescription. So I'll tell people, hey, go back. Like we'll reconnect in 5, 7, 10 days, whatever your schedule looks like. But I need at least 3 to 7 days minimum. Because then I can really see, right? Like if you're burning 2,800 calories a day, we'll use that same example, but you're currently consuming 1,800 calories. You are significantly under eating. So I can't even begin to put you at, like I can't help you lose weight yet. I've got to reverse diet you out of that to get you back to homeostasis. So we can get your hormone levels and get all those other things, all your biofeedback markers back where they need to be to then get you back down.
Yeah.
So having that homeostasis, and that's where having that food log and knowing a person's diet history, that's the other piece that coach really has to have is a diet history, right? If you've tried keto or you've tried South Beach or you've tried, using these special drops and only eating 800 calories like some people try to do, your chances are you've wrecked your metabolism, and we've got to reset you before we can even begin to get where you want to go.
Yeah, that's a really important, and I've had other conversations, distinction in that, you mentioned if someone is trying to lose weight, but they're actually undernourished or under caloried, which seems, in our mind, or at least my mind,
Right.
counterintuitive. But there's that sweet spot. And if you're on the far right or left of that range, your body's not going to do what it needs to do.
Right. Like the best way I've seen it described is like, look at your body on a line. If dead center is homeostasis, and that's 2,800 calories, same example, 2,800 calories. And you have moved that all the way over here at 1,800, and your body is then, if you've been there for an extended period of time, your body has then reestablished homeostasis at 1,800 calories. That means that it's probably turns your body instead of into a fat burning machine, a fat storing machine. It probably means your sleep has gone down. It means your hormones have gone down. It means you're moody, you're not sleeping well, all of that.
Right.
We got to get you back to that center point. So then depending on your goals, if your goals are to add some muscle, cool, then we can put you into a surplus from there. If it is to lose fat, then we can put you in that deficit, but it won't be 1,800 calorie deficit. Because really, if you're at 1,800 calories and you're metabolically adapted, I'd have to put you at 1,200 or 1,300 calories for you to theoretically be losing weight, but your body's already telling the cells to store fat because it doesn't know that it's going to get enough food.
Wow. Very interesting. It just again, it seems counterintuitive that
it does.
You would need to do that, but
well, I mean, that's what I had to do for myself.
Right.
I did 75 hard last year and did not quite have my nutrition right, and I ended up I had underfed myself during that phase, and so I lost 30 pounds, and I didn't really at that time have a full 30 to lose. So I lost a lot of muscle mass. I mean, I lost, out of the 28 pounds I lost, I probably lost 7 or 8 pounds of muscle, and all my lifts went down dramatically in the gym. And so I had to reverse diet myself out the second half of last year. So from August to December, I was adding in 100 calories a week until I got back to what I was burning, which was about 4,000 a day.
Okay.
Because I was only eating about 2,500-ish,
Wow.
which at the time, I didn't have the education I have now, and didn't, at that time I was still going off of just my own empirical data, not real data driven.
Yeah. And so how did you feel during that time? Did you notice a lag in energy or anything?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was constantly tired. I was living on so much caffeine. It was absurd. My
That's a whole
workouts were
conversation.
trash. Right. I mean, but a lot of it comes into that, right? Like
Yeah.
I was having a monster in the morning, and then my pre-workout was 400 milligrams of caffeine. And then I was some days there were some days I was having another monster at 5 o'clock because I wasn't making it till, time to go to bed.
Yeah. But then that
Um,
5 o'clock monster probably, well, at least for me, I'm so caffeine sensitive that then kind of snowballs into the sleep element and then
right. And
your body to recover well.
I wasn't super caffeine sensitive. And since then, over this year, I have backed off a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my pre-workout's now 180 milligrams. And it's just one scoop. And then I don't have any of the caffeine during the day. It's kind of it.
Yeah.
I'll take it back. I have a nootropic I take one, like in the morning before I go coach,
Okay.
to help me wake up, because I'm not a coffee person. No matter how much I try and like coffee, I can't bring myself to do it.
Oh, see, I mean, coffee for me, I even think about morning spots to go and just have a cup of coffee. It's just
I want to like that.
yeah.
Like the thought of that sounds awesome. I can't get past the taste. And when you start loading it up with stuff,
Yeah, but
it
then
defeats a lot of the purpose of it.
yeah, exactly. Well, have you tried Bulletproof?
I have not.
You
I've
might
had
like
some
that
friends
'cause
who
it's got a
swear
little
by it.
sweet. Yeah, it's a little sweet. It's got some better for you stuff like heavier creams or almond milk and then the fats in it.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's super big in the keto
Yeah.
circles.
Yep.
That's something I've tried keto 3 times and my body flat out rejects it. I break out in rashes and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very unpleasant. I've tried it 3 different times for 4 to 6 weeks, because I get people who will ask me like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Because I won't make a recommendation really unless I've tried it,
Yeah.
just so I can kind of know what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
Same thing with like with intermittent fasting. I've messed around with that over this year, 2 different stints for 8 weeks, just to kind of see how I felt on it.
Yeah.
Because people have asked me about it.
Well, and again, back to the diet thing, it's an important distinction on understanding the use of a tool, right? What you're not
Right.
going to always use a hammer for everything, or a screwdriver or a drill.
Right.
Its intended purpose is, could you use it? Yeah. Could you use a spoon to cut something? Yeah. But is it going to work?
I mean, at some point it'll get through it, but
Yeah.
there's way more efficient ways to do it.
Right.
And a lot of that also comes down to, you should really periodize your nutrition, right? Like, so I was talking to a guy last week, and he's prepping his 2021 plans are huge. He's planning to do an Ironman, 2 marathons, and like a full Ironman.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, well, what's your training like now? And he's training 2 times a day and got all this stuff. And I was like, okay, before we go further, let's talk about seasons, right? Anybody has a season. Athletes obviously have more well-defined seasons, right? They've got their preseason, they have their in-season, they have their postseason, and then they have their off-season. Well, you and me who aren't professional athletes don't necessarily have as well-defined seasons.
Right.
So our like in-season might be our beach trip in 12 weeks. So our preseason is going to be when we're prepping for the beach. That's when we're going to really be tracking. And then the in-season portion, when we're at the beach, I tell my clients, don't track at the beach. If you want to work out, cool, work out.
Yeah.
But enjoy the trip. Like that's what you're there for.
That's what the
everything that you like gain, right? Everything you gain, we can make that come off pretty easy on the back end. If we got preseason dialed in right, then your season, whatever that is, if it's a wedding, if it's a beach trip, if it's a big trip to Disney World, whatever, we can get all of that back off and still make progress, so that the next time you go to the beach, you're going to look better than you did this time.
And, I figured too, from a big book for me is Atomic Habits, is you've instilled those habits for 12 plus weeks. Even if you remove yourself to some degree, you're not going to be fully off. So the bad bounce probably isn't going to be anywhere as significant as maybe previous history had been, from a general sense.
Right. But I just tell my clients, I'm like, hey, if you want that pizza, you want to go out to dinner and you want that cheesecake for dessert, go for it. You've earned it.
Yeah.
You're on vacation. Just know when you get back, we got to lock back in. We're going to get into that postseason now.
Yep.
So, with that periodization, your macro profiles change from season to season, depending on which season you're in will determine how that profile looks. So your carbs, fats, and proteins usually pretty similar, but your fat and carb ratio and your calorie number will vary depending on your season.
Interesting. So, you dug into kind of a practical example there was, whatever your in season is, your goal. What's kind of a practical tip for people to get started? Is it the documentation, like maybe before you start working out or getting into a diet, just document what you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Awareness is the first step, right? Like I've got a couple people who are like, hey, I want to learn how to get my diet in track, right? And they're not people I'm looking at coaching. It's just some friends, whatever, who's just looking for some advice. And I always tell them, first question is always, are you tracking your food? If you're not, like good, bad, or ugly, doesn't matter.
Right.
If you don't know what you're eating, you can't really make educated changes. So I tell anyone who asks me, hey, where do I start? You should start by having a food log. Download MyFitnessPal. To me, that's the easiest. Lose It's another good one. Argus is one. First Form has another one. My Transformation, that's another pretty solid app.
Yeah,
I like MyFitnessPal just because it's the most seamless.
Okay.
Say it again.
PR, I think it was.
Maybe there's a couple of them out there.
Yeah.
I like MyFitnessPal just because it's got the most robust food libraries. I've used Lose It and I've used Argus before, and I switched to MyFitnessPal, actually the premium MyFitnessPal, because it's got so much content already in there, and the ability to like create recipes and so like you can, if you weigh your ingredients out, you can create a recipe and delineate the number of servings, and it calculates it all for you. And you can go back to it anytime you make that recipe again.
And it has
saves
recipes,
it for
you said?
Like so you can build your recipe. So like if you know you're going to make chicken and dumplings, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to have the chicken breast, you have chicken breast. You know you're going to have however you make your dumplings, if it's biscuits or whatever, however you do it, all your ingredients, you weigh them out, you add them in there. The little app, it takes 10 seconds to add each one. And then it gives you your total calories. And then as soon as you put your servings in, if you know it's going to make you 12 bowls, you put number of servings as 12 and it divides it all out for you, the carbs, fats, and proteins and calories for you. Wow. It's easy. So I tell people to get a food scale, digital food scale, like $15 on Amazon. Costco's got some really good ones. I've got one from Costco just because I like the warranty with it. And download MyFitnessPal or another app like it, because awareness is what you can then begin to change from.
Right. Gives you that baseline to start from.
And like for coaching clients, I tell them, hey, build awareness first, and then I'm going to educate you once we have the awareness. Because in the end, ultimately, education drives compliance.
Right.
Like if I want you to stick to a program, I've got to completely lay out all of it. Why, take a big book for me is Extreme Ownership. I have to take extreme ownership of answering any and all questions you have, and then being available for you to ask any questions that I may have not hit on.
Right. No, that's key. And I think the other thing is the practical aspect. So mention recipes recommended through that app. Do you have any go-to recipes you use? Putting you on the spot for your cooking.
I'm a really boring eater. Like I'm perfectly okay eating the same meal every day for 7 months. I did it. So when I went through my big cut, my breakfast was always a double protein shake because I trained fasted in the morning first thing. I'd get in the office, drink my shake, and then my lunch and dinners for 7 months were like, I think I had 2 cheat meals in 7 months. Was the chicken breast, protein pasta, a little bit of sauce, and broccoli. All I ate for 7 months for lunch and dinners. And
wow.
So I'm repetitive. Now I've gotten creative with my seasonings. Now I'm not as repetitive, right? Like I'll typically, one of my favorite recipes, I like Asian food a lot. So I'll get some white or jasmine rice, some broccoli, stir fry it, and then do teriyaki chicken. So then I'll have teriyaki chicken, broccoli, and rice, and I'll portion them out in these little single compartment boxes. And that's one of my best meal prep ones. You can swap in skirt steak. So if you want to do like beef and broccoli, you can do that. Rice is one of my go-to staple carbs.
Yeah, us too.
It's easy to digest. It's easy to make. I mean, my rice cooker, I can make about 6 servings of rice in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Now my servings are bigger than most people's. I mean, it makes 3 cups of rice. So that's, I think, for a normal person, like 12 servings, but I have to do double servings. So for me, it's a little bit bigger. Most of my meals are going to be in that 600 to 800 calorie range.
Okay. So
aside from my shakes.
You mentioned supplements. So do you include or suggest supplements as a way to kind of augment being, one, cooking a lot of food could be laborious, or maybe you just don't have the lifestyle for that or skill?
To a point, supplements are one of those things that they're not regulated for one. Very few companies invest in third-party testing. So there are some that fall on the generally recommended, right? A multivitamin, fish oil is a good one, vitamin D, things like that have shown, studies have shown to be very beneficial, right? Fish oil reduces inflammation, vitamin D improves hormone levels, improves mood, improves all these different things. And the multivitamin covers a lot of the micros that you might miss out on if you're a super picky eater, right? If you don't like a lot of colorful foods, then having a good multivitamin augments some of that. It can't fully replace it, but it does help some.
Sure.
As far as me, I take protein powder. I do take highly branched chain cyclodextrin, which is a high density carb that I put in my protein shake for when I'm done, because it shuts off the cortisol response from my training. So if you train really hard and you know that, like if you struggle with your carb number, some people have no problem hitting their carb numbers. I struggle with hitting my carb numbers with clean carbs. I mean, I'm a coach and I still struggle with, if I know that I've got 100 carbs left and I can fit some chips and salsa in there, would I love to do it? Absolutely. And so I've added the cyclodextrin because it helps fill some of those carbs so I don't have as much left. But also having the post-workout meal is your most important meal of the day by far. So if you can get a good protein and carb ratio in that post-workout meal, it helps you recover. It shuts off the cortisol response, so it stops breaking down the muscle, and it allows you to start recovering faster.
Interesting.
So, and cyclodextrin is one of those. It's a relatively newer one. There's a couple of different supplements that use it as like an intro workout. So some people will take it. Like Redcon has one, I think called Cluster Bomb. That they recommend it for intro workout. So like if you know that you're going to train for an hour and a half, at minute 30 into the workout, drink it. It'll help kind of push you through the end. Yeah. I just like to take mine afterwards. But protein, cyclodextrin, and a mild pre-workout, and then the other 3, multi, fish oil, and vitamin D are kind of all I mess with at this point. Cool. I started out doing a lot of different ones. I've played around with them over the years. Most of them just turned out to be, they haven't really done much for me. Yeah. You spend a lot of money. You don't know what's in them half the time. Half of them have proprietary blends or things that you're not going to know what it is. Yeah. I've tried fat burners. I've tried all these different things that in the end don't move the needle, and you're way better off putting that money into higher quality food. Right. Yeah. Better. Yeah. Higher quality food. If you can vary your protein sources, vary your veggie sources, and then have a good solid staple carb that you can go to, it makes the meal prep thing easier. Right. Yeah. I mean, I've found a lot of tricks and hacks over the years to make meal prep a lot easier. Like chicken, if you're trying to meal prep is one of the things that quantity is everything, right? Like I found that I could go to Costco and get a 6-pound bag of broccoli. It was 6 individually wrapped 1-pound bags. Throw it in a skillet, a little bit of olive oil, whatever seasoning you want. 20 minutes, it's done, or 10 minutes, it's done.
Prepackaged for you individually at the right amount.
Right. You just dump the whole bag in. For me, that would be enough broccoli for 4 days. So I was cooking 2 skillets of broccoli at the same time. And then you can bake chicken. Most ovens, it's about 405 for 40 minutes. I mean, I was cooking at one point, about 8 pounds of chicken every Sunday. And I would just eat on that all week. Yeah.
But yeah,
because you can.
makes it easier to make sure you're hitting that number, because especially if you're
That's the thing.
undernourishing, and you know, especially not in this current state, many of us working from home, although the access is there, there's still the effort of having to go through the process of cooking or putting something together.
Ease is everything, right? I mean, convenience is king. Most of my people I talk to, that I'm like, are you meal prepping? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, so is it so much easier to stop at McDonald's or Chick-fil-A if you know you don't have food ready at home? Yeah, every single time.
Yep.
If you have the option to have to go home and prep something versus a microwave for a minute and a half, or you can stop somewhere and get something that you know is not going to be good for you, isn't pushing you towards your goals, but it sure does taste good.
Yeah.
Ease will trump your goals if you're not disciplined. So you kind of either, fail to plan or plan to, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
There's kind of no way around it.
That's an important distinction and point on just, finding those probably tall barriers to success that everyone really runs into. No matter how successful somebody is, you're going to run into that, and being able to lower that. So meal prep sounds like a critical tool.
It is. It's one of those things that I preach to nutrition clients all the time. Hey, if you want to make this as easy for you as possible and remove one less barrier, spend 40 minutes on Sunday or Saturday or whatever day you want, but you can meal prep a week's worth of meals in 40 minutes. Chicken, at least.
Yeah.
Depending on your other meat sources, maybe a little bit different because you may have to cook in shifts, but overall, it's definitely easier.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, this has been awesome. I think it's been really practical. It defines kind of the components and, some practical ways to kind of get to whatever your objective is, whether it's burning fat or growing muscle, on understanding macros and the importance of them. So thanks for that. I wanted to close it out though with a couple personal questions. So what are you reading right now?
I am reading Invention by Justin Camp is one of the books I'm reading. And there's one more that I was getting ready to start today, but I'm drawing a blank on the name. I'm about to start Extreme Ownership again too. That's the other one I'm about to start. But Invention by Justin Camp is one that my men's group's going through.
Cool. Okay, what are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
Podcast is Order of Man, Rich Froning's podcast, Froning and Friends.
Okay.
Is a really good one. On Sundays, he has a little devotional one that's really solid.
Cool.
And then Andy Frisell is another good one I like.
Real AF.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just started listening to that. I've listened to a handful, and it's pretty spot on.
Right.
Last one, what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
I'm really big on active rest. My body struggles with just complete rest. So if I know that I need to take a break from training or adjust my training modality to give my body a break, I'll go up in the mountains. Right. I mean, I live in North Georgia. I can go for a 4-mile hike up a mountain in 10 minutes, a 10-minute drive. And so I'll throw my weight vest on, throw some AirPods, throw my earbuds in and just go.
Nice.
And for me, that is relaxing for not only, my body as a whole, because that isn't destroying it in the gym, but it's also relaxing for the mind. It kind of resets spiritually, kind of gets me back centered. I'll usually throw in either Fronting with Friends, the devotional one, or my church does one too. So I'll usually throw one of those in to kind of get me thinking as I'm kind of right foot, left footing up the mountain.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. I mean, opportunity to enjoy nature and God's creation is an important thing. And there's a lot of science behind a lot of that too. And
right.
Both from a physical standpoint and the mental aspect of it too.
Mm-hmm. That's how I spend most of my Sunday mornings is sometimes I take the kids with me depending on what's going on. But
yeah,
if I can get it just me going up there, I'll try to do that.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, again, thanks for the time. How can folks get a hold of you?
I'm on Instagram at loading.superdad as a handle that I've been using for a little while. And then also Iron 4 Strength Conditioning is on there. And then I'm also on Facebook.
Awesome. Thanks again. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.